Hello, everybody, and welcome to kind of our second webinar here at Legacy Junction. Myself, Kimberly, Jacqueline, and Tracy are going to be doing some presenting of our bulk seed review. Some of this is varieties that we're going to go over that we do have available through our Big Stone or Lamont locations, and others are just some that you may have been hearing of in the marketplace. I just wanted to start off with a little bit of a quote here. I think this pertains pretty well to all of our cropping choices as far as variety goes. Variety choice should never be based solely on yield performance, as it is only one factor that affects net return. The genetic yield potential of a variety is often masked by numerous factors, some of which can be controlled through variety choice and others through astute agronomic management. Producers are encouraged to consider other characteristics such as maturity, plant height, lodging, harvestability, and disease and pest resistance when deciding which varieties to grow. Long-term satisfaction with a variety is often related to non-yield characteristics, and I think we can all think of a time where we maybe had one variety of, let's say, canola that outdid the whole farm, but maybe you were harvesting it and all you did was cuss and unplug your combine the whole time. Probably not something that you stuck with in that case. So we're just going to be going over a little bit about falling number and some pre-harvest resistance sprouting ratings, a review of disease packages in cereals, and then some CWRS wheat, CPS wheat, and malt and feed barley plot data and varieties, and wrapping up with a little bit on ergot and seed treatments. So falling number and pre-harvest sprouting. This is something that we saw a big problem with going into last fall there. This year we haven't been seeing the same problems concerning falling number, but we have been seeing lots of sprouting as a degrading factor. We're going to be touching on this a little bit later, but moving into the previous spring, we were getting some questions regarding sprouting resistance and varieties, and Brandon was probably the most asked about one here. Falling number is affected by many interrelated factors, kind of as we saw last year, and some of these don't always make sense to what we see on paper. There's no real cut and dry thing, it seems, when it comes to falling number. All we can do is manage what we were able to through variety selection, as well as some fertilizer management and harvest management. Obviously, there is nothing we can do to stop Mother Nature if it's going to be rainy all harvest or we're going to get those early frosts. But as far as selecting for the sprouting resistance, this is something that we can do in the springtime that'll hopefully help us out in the fall as well. So in our cereal disease package is something that we don't really talk a lot about. We do discuss disease package a lot when we're selecting canola seed varieties. However, when selecting cereal varieties, it sort of gets chucked to the wayside. Fusarium head blight is something that we should begin maybe looking at a little bit harder as we forge forward into the seasons. The most susceptible to this is our wheat, so durum, spring, and winter wheat, and then followed by triticale, barley, and oats. This area we did see some fusarium infected heads throughout the growing season. We did not see these kernels as a degrading factor at harvest time in this area. However, many other centers throughout Western Canada did, and I think from the springtime when we did have that trouble sourcing fusarium-free seed, I don't think this should be a surprise to anybody. Just to note, if you have been keeping up on cereal disease packages, there is no longer a loose smart resistance rating needed in wheat, and as with all resistance ratings, any crop with an R resistance doesn't mean that you actually have complete resistance forever. It just means that we should still be practicing those best management practices and that you're less likely to get the disease using this tool.
All right, I will take over and we will talk about some wheat varieties here. So here's some trial data that is compiled on hard red and CPS wheat varieties. The varieties that you see in red, I will note off the top, are ones that we can sell through a Big Stone location in Wetaskiwin. So this is compiled data throughout Alberta. It gives us a good idea how these varieties perform widespread. Like we mentioned earlier, varieties can perform differently on different farms, different soil, different fields, so we use this as a general guideline. Not surprisingly, Viewfield was the leading variety, with Eli, Gabbro, Landmark, Brandon, and Stettler all following. In terms of protein, we are not surprised to see that as the yield increases, the protein does decrease slightly. Viewfield also offers a shorter straw length, giving it the advantage to stand a little better in comparison to the others. So the varieties that we have available, the Viewfield, Brandon, Gabbro, and Redberry, are all available through our Big Stone location in Wetaskiwin, just as a reminder there. When it comes to CPS varieties, Crossfield, Goodwin, and Penhold are the top three performers, Penhold being the most readily grown that we have here in Alberta. The protein fluctuates on these varieties anywhere from 0.5 point to 1.1% of a point, and CPS grows better obviously in some areas than it does in others, but we are using this as a general guideline for how these varieties do on average. So this information that we have here is the information that we can find on the CGC website, but it is a breakdown of the degrading factors and average protein of the wheat as a whole grown in 2020. This can be used as a benchmark to see where you fall into the mix. So it might be a little bit hard, a little bit blurry to see there. We tried our best to get it as clear as possible, but we do have to keep in mind that this is a compilation of samples that have been sent to the CGC and are not all samples that are collected at elevators throughout Alberta, so we do have to take this information with a grain of salt. The top varieties that were obviously going to represent a large portion of these samples were Brandon, Viewfield, Landmark, Eli, and Redberry. So some of the ones we talked about on that last slide there. There were about 4,000 samples graded, and of that, 58% were a number one. Of the grades that are not a number one, other than the obvious non-HBK kernels, which, as a reminder, are kernels that are not the rich red color that we like. We see that the frost, fusarium damage, and sprouting are the lead degrading factors, and this is a trend that we also found at our location as well, so this was pretty widespread. Of the samples that did grade a 1 red, the mean protein was 13.1, and of the samples that graded a 2 red, the mean protein was 12.8. One theory on why this could be a difference is because of the requirement of the HBK, which are the dark red kernels in a 1 red. If you've ever looked at a sample of wheat and saw that there are whitish dots or specks in your wheat, this is likely due to starch formation, which we do have a picture of, and we'll see it there. So those are considered non-HBK kernels and also have more starch than protein. The overall protein on the sample would be expected to be lower in these cases. Fertilization and understanding the variety that you have selected to grow would be more important in situations such as this one, and understanding that higher yielding varieties require more nutrients to achieve the high yield and the protein targets that we have set out.
Just to note, we do have a chat box here. If you have any questions as we go through, feel free to put them there, and we will try and get them answered for you.
You betcha. So when it comes to barley varieties, like the wheat ones, we have highlighted in red what's available through our Big Stone location in Wetaskiwin, just noting that Synergy, although it is not available through Wetaskiwin, it is available through our Lacombe location. There is currently no Copeland available right now, and of the varieties presented here, the highest yielding on average were Synergy, Copper, Surish, and Low. The most widely accepted varieties in terms of malt programs have been Copeland, Synergy, Metcalf, and Metcalf is dying and Connect is gaining some steam quickly. We do have a couple slides outlining that as well. Although there's no protein outlined on these charts with the barley, because that's not something that we necessarily focus on a lot of the time, I'd just like to remind you guys that Richardson Pioneer does buy high protein malt barley, so you can go for both protein and yield when delivering to us. In terms of feed barley, in these trials, Austinson was the clear winner. Surish was also included as a feed barley, but is gaining acceptance as a malt variety, as you see in that first chart, and it was very close in yield to Austinson. A variety not outlined here, but has been very popular feed variety in the past, is Coalition. I know some growers still grow that. According to the tech bulletin of Coalition, you can expect about 2.7% less yield than the Austinson in Alberta trials, so about 110 bushels for comparison. Lodging is also a very important factor to consider when selecting your malt barley. Although they are similar in their ratings, you will see slight differences both in the posted data and the data that you observe on your farm. It seems to go hand in hand. The higher the yield, the poorer the lodging rating. And one way to manage this is with proper fertilization, especially potash. That attributes directly to straw strength. We have seen Alberta soils very high in potash. However, the rich Alberta soils are also high in other nutrients such as phos, magnesium, nitrogen, and calcium, to name just a couple of them, that will tie up or antagonize potash availability. So these next two slides, like I mentioned, are going to go over the malt barley in the market and what is moving and how much of it's moving. They're just quick graphs. They outline the opportunities, growing, declining popularity as well. So as you can see, Copeland still remains the king, but it is on a slow decline, while Synergy is gaining momentum fairly quickly. Metcalf, although was once very popular, it is getting phased out rather quickly. And then on this next slide, you will see that, to add on to the first one, it's just showing those varieties that were below 5% of seeded acres. So we're just zooming into basically the bottom of that last graph. We wanted to make sure that there was attention drawn to the varieties that are gaining steam at a fairly decent pace. Connect, Bow, Fraser, and Surish have been increasing rapidly, and if these trends continue, it will not be surprising to see one or more of these varieties be among the top malting varieties in a few years, especially that Connect one.
So we're just going to touch a little bit on oats here. We did begin accepting oats this fall at our elevator here in Camrose. So this top portion is some of the varieties we accept that I could find some trial data on. If you're growing something that's not on this list and you're unsure if it will be accepted for milling, just ask us and we will be sure to get you an answer there. AC Morgan is definitely kind of the standout one, and it is the one that we see grown most commonly in this area. Just to touch on what we do look at for milling oats versus pony oats, that beta-glucan percentage highlighted here, the higher this is, the more desirable it is for milling and human consumption. I couldn't find a direct comparison chart to human versus pony oats acceptance for standards, but as many of you know, horse people are a little bit crazy when it comes to feeding their horses. But they are not looking at this beta-glucan percentage. So that's just a little bit about some oats there. And this is the milling specs that we have here. No surprise, in 2020, we saw a lot of barley and wheat in oats, and likewise saw a lot of wheat in barley and a lot of barley in wheat. Color was the other major degrading factor here for us. We did see a lot of green hulls coming in throughout the season, and depending on, there's times we might be able to work with this. Unfortunately, this year was not one of those years. Our oat program is something that we're hoping to grow in the future, and we do have some best management practice on oats available if you're looking for that, and we are also happy to do another webinar just kind of going over oats and how to best meet that milling spec.
Okay, well, now that you've made your variety choice and you've decided that that's what you want to grow for your farm, what should you treat that seed with? And yes, if you're buying certified seed, I still recommend that you do a good seed treatment. You want to give that seed the best start as it possibly can into the growing season, because likely you're going to be saving some of that seed back for the next years. So choosing a seed treatment, as you can see from this chart, is not simply one that does it all. We have to look at what diseases you think are more common or more of a concern on your farm. And as what's a disease concern, it's also the flowability of a product can be an issue for in the spring, when in those cooler morning temps, it can get a little thick. And if that's the way that you're treating your seed, is on the go in the morning, you might want to look at a product that has a little more flowability that can keep you going quite quickly. Some diseases are more of an issue when we have wet conditions, and some diseases are more of an issue when we have dry conditions like root and foot rot. So suppliers have tried to hit somewhere in the middle so that we have a pretty good coverage for all of them. But watching what type of conditions you're going to have in the coming spring is a good idea to look at when you're looking at seed treatments. In general, and I'm not going to go into specifics on each product here, but in general, Raxil Pro and Rancona Trio, and if you're not familiar with Rancona Trio, it's from UPL, and it is very similar to Raxil Pro in actives and in flowability, Those products are better for barley. They do have a little stronger control on smuts, which have been an issue in the past, but all the products on the market are really good for wheat. So I'm not too concerned on which one that you want to use for that. It's mostly looking at what is your mechanical application that you're using to get that seed treatment on your seed. And it really comes down to having the best coverage. So a lot of growers think that they have to use the product as the way it comes in the jug. And if you're having trouble getting that nice, consistent red color, always feel free to add some water to your seed treatment if you're struggling to get that coverage. It doesn't make any difference on the efficacy of the product. You just need to add more product to your seed to get to that appropriate rate. So it really can make a difference on coverage. So it just will add a little extra drying time to when you want to put that seed in the ground. But if you're struggling to get coverage because maybe your system isn't working that great, or if you are going a little bit earlier in the morning and you're finding that your seed treatment is gumming up a bit, adding a little water can make a huge difference. Some seed treatment decisions come down to programming. It's relatively easy to hit the bucket on these programs and can really help with your rebate. Not that one should farm for programs, but if disease spectrum and flowability are not a concern, this is definitely something to consider. Ergot. Ergot's not a fun topic to talk about, but I did want to touch base with it because it is something that we do see from time to time. And 2019 was a really high ergot year. Some rotations have us going back to those same fields from 2019 with a cereal crop for 2021. So this may present some ergot challenges. Those spores are still viable on those fields, and the ergot pressure could be very high. We've done some more tillage and harrowing in the last couple of years than we have in the past. This will help bury some of those ergot spores and maybe get them out of the way. However, if we bury half, we still have half to worry about. So no variety on the market, as you can see from our presentation, posts any tolerances or resistance to ergot. It's all about pollination time and being open to ergot spores. The shorter the time, the less the risk. Copper has seen a lot of buzz regarding ergot, and not that it's not a good option, but it is certainly not a treatment option. Copper deficiencies have shown to increase the potential infection for ergot. Wheat and barley plants are self-pollinated, but when copper is deficient, pollen becomes sterile. When the plant is not pollinated, it opens up its flowers, hoping to receive pollen from an outside source. And then this opens it up to the ergot spores. We are located in a low copper level band in central Alberta, so this can be a concern for us. Most of the soil tests that I've seen in the last few years have shown quite low levels. We're looking for 1 part per million on a soil test to be sufficient for cereals, and we're just not there. We're often at a 0.6 or a 0.8. Excess moisture also makes it harder for plants to extract copper from the soil. It's just not as efficient as root systems are smaller and they're stressed. So the last couple of years have not been good for ergot levels. So how do you get copper? Granular copper in your fertilizer blend. It's something that we blend in through our system here. Pro-coat copper is gaining some momentum. It's a coating that you put on your whole dry fertilizer blend. It provides many low concentration touch points for your roots to intercept and can give you that copper benefit. Foliar copper application at the booting stage can also be really effective treatment if you're seeing symptoms of low copper, as in the pigtailing or the drying off of the tips of the flag leaf of your cereal crop. One thing that is exciting for ergot, as we don't often have a lot of control in whether or not we have ergot, is a new fungicide treatment coming from Bayer for 2021. It's still pending registration, so the how and why this works has not been entirely published, but I'm sure, knowing Bayer, they will have a big marketing boom when it does come out. So at head timing application, so 50% flower, the same timing as for Fusarium head blight, new Prozero Pro, or new Prozero, as you may have heard it being called, does have suppression of ergot. So when we're using that T3 fungicide timing, we can see some suppression of ergot, like you can see in the picture there. So from new Prozero to the untreated is quite dramatic. So since we're still pending registration, I don't have a lot of information regarding it, but the plan from Bayer that I'm aware of at this time is that both Prozero and Prozero Pro will be on the market for next year. So if ergot is something you're concerned about, or maybe it was a concern in 2019, we can talk about it later when all the paperwork is done. And with that, I'd like to, I don't see any questions in the chat box, so at this time, I'd like to thank you for attending our cereal seed webinar. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for the time. Thank you for taking the time to view us online. These are different times we are living in, and not being able to see our growers face to face is tough. And this is not our ideal way of doing business, but we are trying the best we can. So if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. If you have any suggestions for future webinars, we'd be happy to hear. And with that, I'd like to say from Kim, myself, and Jacqueline, and all of us here at Richardson Pioneer, a very Merry Christmas to all our growers and their families, and a happy and healthy New Year to all. And we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.